Hello, how's it going, my friends? This is Video Master Ingvar Johannesson from Iceland, and I want to present to you a very recent game that I just found. It's from the Mumbai Mayor's Cup, presumably in India, and with the white pieces, the strong Georgian Grandmaster Mikhail Mchedlishvili. Should have pronounced. No, should have practiced the pronunciation, I guess. But Mikhail Mchedlishvili with white and R.Sangma with the black pieces. And yeah, here we have a notable rating difference of 310 elo in favor of white. And usually, when such a player loses with that much difference, people take notice. And yeah, I'm gonna produce some videos where we have this rating difference, and I'm gonna call it, sort of a David versus Goliath series, but maybe 300 is on the low side of David versus Goliath. But anywho, let's make this the first one in the series. But on its own, it's a fantastically interesting game, and it has so many things that makes the games interesting. Material imbalance, surprising moves, etc. So, Mchedlishvili opened with d4. Mchedlishvili against R.Sangma. Mikhail against Rahul. How about that? Mikhail against Rahul. Okay, white against black. We'll go with that. So e6, and enough with the shenanigans. Black signals. He wants to play the Nimzo. Bishop b4 against knight c3, or he wants to play against knight f3. Either the boko with bishop b4 check or the queen's Indian. White, however, goes with the move g3, and that forces the issue a little bit. And black can still go for a boko type setup here with bishop b4, but there's no b6. And most of the time we transpose here after d5 to the Catalan. Knight f3, d takes c4. Now, when I played the Catalan, I was always a little bit afraid of the lines where black takes and just goes a6. I mean, not terribly scared. I mean, usually you win the pawn back. Usually you sometimes have to sacrifice it. But overall, the safest option for white is just to give a check here and then take the pawn. Not to worry about being pawned down in life and just go from there. But that's not the most critical. The reason for this is I was never diligent enough to study it for white, and also had one game where black played a6, Grandmaster Alexander Baburin, and I sort of didn't get anything and just lost. But okay, in this game, black went knight c6, castles, and rook b8. And this can also be reached via another move order when we start with a6. That's why I was talking about this a6 move, and now a6. So black's plan is quite clear. First off, he moved this rook out of this diagonal. So now he's actually ready to move this pawn to b5, support his extra pawn, and there's no tricks with knight e5. So if the rook was still on a8 and we play b5, there might be knight e5 when this guy is pinned on the diagonal. So the moves make sense. So white decides to sacrifice the pawn and build up a strong pawn center with e4, bishop e7. This is the main move. White can also play b5, but this is the most common. And well, according to theory here, queen e2 is considered to be the most testing move, and the one that is recommended by Boris Avrukh in his Grandmaster repertoire books for white. And it's believed that d5 doesn't offer white much after knight b4. Here we attack this pawn, but bishop f5, and if you take the pawn, bishop d3, something like this. So after a3, knight d3, white regains the pawn, but black has the bishop pair and not many problems, it would seem. So we go back, and instead of d5, there's queen to e2. Okay, now black holds on to the extra pawn, and rook d1. The other option is actually to take the pawn on d4 instead of b5. You'll notice that this pawn is actually on pre, but white would just take twice and play rook d1, and this queen doesn't really feel too good here. We're gonna win back one pawn immediately, probably this one, and the bishop will come out with tempo here or here. This pawn is weak as well. Black will fall behind in development and has to be careful. So that's not everybody's cup of tea. So b5. Okay, rook d1. Black castles. White plays d5. We take. And now if you take back with a pawn, well, or a knight. I mean, if you take with a knight, then we're just on a pawn. And nothing much going on. Also, yeah, if pawn takes, just knight b4 or something. We can jump to d3, we can try to win this pawn. Black doesn't seem to have any problems, and that explains this move e5. And this is still well known in theory. In fact, I've played this with the black pieces actually. But that was kind of a one-off, because I usually don't play this way with black, but it was a training tournament, so I wanted to try out some new things. But yeah, you're not, if you move the knight here, then finally white takes on d5, but now it's much more dangerous because we have some discoveries on the queen, utilizing this rook. So black's interesting option here is to play d4 and actually sacrifice a piece here. But for this piece, we already have 3 pawns. The pawn that we won on c4, the pawn that we took on d5, and the one that just took on f6. And we also have some very centralized and dangerous pawns here. Queen e4 is the main move when black goes bishop b7. And now knight d5. Okay, this walks into a pin, but we can easily unpin knight b4 after knight takes f6 check. So this unpins the knight, and now queen f4. Now, a small dilemma for black. If we take on f4, then this guy's attacked, and there's no way to really do anything about it. So here actually black accepts the double pawns. He plays c5, protects this important pawn here, and has to allow this. And here in Avrukh's book, bishop f4 is a novelty, but there have been several games already in this line. Rook b to c8, that's also what I played against, well, I'm not going to give up against who I played it, because it was a secret training tournament. Bishop d6 attacks the rook, rook d8, bishop e7, rook e8. Black gives up one of his pawns, but instead his rook is ready to get active. Now, here in this game, M.Mchedlishvili against R.Sangma, black played rook c6. In my game, however, I did play knight d3, which is something that I saw in the database. I think it was a game with Topalov. Can't remember if Topalov had black or white. This actually looks like Topalov with black. And we actually followed that game. White gives back the piece here. He might have a choice, but not a very pleasant one. So immediately the material is equal, but Black seems to be doing fine here with this well-posted knight. White tries to get rid of it. Plays f3 before taking. After king f2, rook to d6. The knight retreats. And here I took on e2. And we had a quick draw. And actually, if I remember correctly, we even repeated this Topalov game. But in the current game, M.Mchedlishvili against R.Sangma, R.Sangma played rook c6, to which M.Mchedlishvili replied bishop to g5. Computers actually want to go bishop h4, but bishop g5 looks much more human. I mean, you want more scope for your bishop, and you're also helping to protect these squares in case the pawns get too dangerous. Okay, so let's take stock here. White has an extra piece, but black has a number of pawns, 7 of them, and this interesting pawn match here. So 2 pawns for the piece, but also some active pieces. I mean, this knight can do some damage, and white maybe doesn't have any particularly active pieces. Rook e2, so threatening this b2 pawn. But white didn't care, he attacked this rook here. And, well, the most natural seems to be rook b6. But that might be problematic. Rook b6, there might be bishop d8. And we lose material. We take on g2, we take on b6, and things start to drop off. We can't allow that. If rook c7, maybe something similar happens. In any case, black played here the interesting move, h6, just leaving the rook on c6. Already done a piece, but now sacrificing the exchange. So white just took it, and now bishop takes h6. Another crazy line here would be something like rook d2, when we take on g5, take on e2, and take on h4. And I mean, how do you evaluate such a position? Black is down 2 exchanges, but he does have 2 pawns for it. And the question here is simply if black can move his pawn mass forward. If he can't, and white can find time to do something, then he'll probably pick off some pawns. I mean, if black did nothing and we got like a3 and got this rook around here or here, things might start dropping off. You could imagine, yeah, maybe a4 trying to disrupt the pawns, but my feeling is this position wouldn't be entirely clear and very hard to evaluate. Instead of rook d2, white just took the pawn on h6, but this did give black tempo here to take on b2, and now the pawns are becoming really dangerous. Black, however, has indeed invested the whole rook for these dangerous pawns, so something needs to happen. White went knight f5, and this has ideas of knight e7 check, but for the moment black ignored them with c3. I think it's more natural here for black to play bishop f3. And, well, okay, number 1 because the computer says it, but number 2, when you have such a material imbalance and it's a question of initiative, I think it's useful to keep a bishop which is unopposed. I mean, black has the light squared bishop, white has the black squared bishop, so I think it's useful to keep the light squared bishop so that you can control some light squares, and I think this bishop will work well with, say, a pawn on c3. And yeah, just trying to make sense of the position conceptually, but of course calculation is extremely important here. But Having said that, it's almost impossible to play such a position correctly without some preparation on the board. But it's a really interesting position, and for sure, with nothing on the line, it would be much more fun to play the black side here for sure with the dynamic pawns. So he starts moving the pawns with c3, knight e7 check, and now we get this bishop. And yeah, when I first looked over this game, this was one of the points where you browse through the game, through the moves, and you're like, okay, there, okay, it takes, blah blah blah. But here I browsed, but then oh, it didn't take. He played c2. So many moves in this game where you expect a recapture, but there's a session 2. Here black played c2. Turns out the computer wanted to take on c6, but c2 is interesting. However, it might actually be a losing move here, because white played correctly with knight takes b4. Now, if you take on d1, which looks tempting, maybe we start attacking our pawns. So let's say takes here, here. Now we have to move the bishop, and something like bishop f8 looks useful. Attacking this pawn. And maybe if you have to put the rook in front of the pawn, now it's maybe difficult to advance those pawns. Even still, at a glance, it's not easy to assess here. So knight takes b4, c takes b4. And here, white played, well, almost a losing blunder. He went from completely winning to, well, struggling even. But he played bishop f8. He should have played rook d to c1. Simply giving up the bishop on h6. But the thing is, he's just in time with his king now to simply pick off the black pawns. Once the king gets to d3, we pick off this pawn. And if d3, it doesn't make a difference, we go here. And then we start picking them off. And black simply doesn't have time for a time-consuming maneuver like a5, a4, and b3. We would have already picked off some pawns, and it's hard to actually advance from there. So that's what white should have done. Instead, he went bishop f8. And now the pawns start to count here. d3, nice move. Can't take it because of the check on the first rank. And black wins, so that might explain the move king g2. But on the other hand, we're still not threatening to take on d3 because there's still rook b1. So maybe king g2 was a bit too timid of a move, not really solving an intention. So maybe something like rook a to c1, which kind of forces takes on d1, and then at least we get some pawns back. But I mean, having said that, king g2, a5. White still had a chance to go rook a c1 here. But you see the lines. I mean, this is just a simple line. Takes d2. I mean, otherwise you take on d3. King f1. Takes on a2. You bring the king. Advancing the pawns. Attacking. Protecting. Now king d1. Just so that there's never a d1 check. And then picking off the remaining pawns. And from here, maybe it's hard for black to advance actually. So maybe after a3, white can just take on a3. But yeah, this is just a sample line that I was looking at. But just to show how crazy it is. I mean, rook a2 check, king e3, b4. And the game goes on. Probably white is doing well here. because it's hard for black to advance, but b4 is a nice move. Now we can't move a king because we take here, and if it takes on b3 then rook a3 is a deadly pin, and if white takes we promote, so this wins for black actually. So a hell of a game. Instead of rook ac1 he played bishop c5, which was the losing blunder finally. Now black took on a2, rook takes a2, and now we have a cluster of 5 pawns here, which is really hard to deal with. And yeah, at the moment white is a rook and bishop up for some pawns, for 3 pawns, so basically a whole rook up, but already there's a rook hanging. White moves this rook to c1, but not b3. And the pawns are just too strong at this point. White tried bishop d4, but b2. And now another moment where you might expect a recapture, but actually then white takes on d3. So of course we flick in c takes d1 queen. White took it, rook takes b2, rook takes d3, and pawn to a4. And here the 2632 rated M.Mchedlishvili resigned against the 2322 rated R.Sangma. A really nice and enjoyable game. And of course the resignation is, well, you don't have to explain, these pawns just run by themselves here. Basically, more or less, would be 1 pawn queens. Nothing to be done. So, really spectacular game. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. So this was the first David versus Goliath. Stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have more soon. See you later. Bye bye.